Welcome to my humble abode. I'm Yoki the Tail Spinner, and this is Tales Over Coffee, where we start the day with a narrative game and a cup of coffee in the hope of welcoming a blessed day. We return now to the third and final of the Ukrainian War Stories. Mariupol, with Dr. Dima here, his assistant, Dr. Anya, and their intern for the day, perhaps, Danya, 6-year-old boy. The situation had hit rock bottom several days into the war, and yet it somehow got worse. All pharmacies had been cleaned out, and our shortages were getting dire. The city had no heating or running water. People cooked over campfires, and often didn't have time to run for cover when shelling would begin. Victor called them our future patients. Somehow the local cell phone company continued to provide coverage, but only in the city centre. Walkie-talkies worked a lot better. The military had lent one of their own to Victor so he could request help if necessary. As we found out, requests for help could go both ways. We need all you can give us: bandages, hemostatics, painkillers. The voice on the other end wavered. Can spare any, over. Victor and I exchanged glances. The head of anesthesiology sunk his face into his hands. We couldn't spare anything. Whatever we gave away, we'd end up lacking. Still, Victor decided to follow through. Would that be enough? Have your medic make a list, over. Won't happen. One of them is dead. The other got wounded and the Russians took her. There was a moment of uneasy silence. Presumed dead as well, over. The hellish thing to follow up on the butcher story with. Stay put, I will contact you in 10 minutes. Out. Victor dismissed all the ward managers except for me. Then he looked me in the eye. Dima, I'm gonna need those boys. I'm gonna help those boys. You run to the hospital while I'm gone. What? We operated on the edge of collapse. Without Victor's leadership, all would fall apart, and even if he was gone for a day. And if something happened to Victor out there, I knew he valued honesty, so I told him my concerns directly. Listen, our Mariupol is ruined. The city no longer exists. When our medicine runs out, the only sensible decision will be to evacuate. He gave me an unsettling look. Right now, our boys are dying out there, and I used to be a combat officer. So unless you have a better idea... Damn. I admired him at that moment. But anyway, he was exactly where he was needed the most. On some level, I knew he was right. The hospital was failing, and we could only do so much while holed up inside. But Victor wasn't the only talented surgeon here. Sure, Anya would be out of her mind with worry, and I wasn't enthusiastic about bullets either. But if a volunteer was needed, it could very well be me. Then again, the Marines only requested medicine. Perhaps that would suffice. No, they've lost their medics. They've lost their medics. They need someone. I'm not just going to give them theirs, they need one of us. I don't know if I should go or Victor should go. If Victor goes, the hospital fails. At least I assume that's what it is, because it'll drop to 0 readiness. Emotionally, it's right that Victor goes. He's a combat medic, he's ex-military, he belongs there. And there's also the impact this will have on Dima, and possibly on Anya too, although it's not said here. But I've played Dima as someone dedicated to saving as many as possible. Therefore, leaving the hospital failed. Can't happen. I'll go. Our soldiers need a good medic, let it be me. Annie was out of her mind with worry, just as I thought. She was angry, then desperate, begging me not to go. If I had known back then how things would turn out, maybe I'd have listened. The Marines met me and led me to their positions in the city's east. And it was so much worse than I thought. There were several dozens of wounded, most of whom were nonetheless on their feet fighting. My operating area was the basement of an apartment block, where the wounded were lying on the floor, blown off limbs, dirty old bandages, and lots of spilled brilliant green. Brilliant green. That basement smelled like an old grave. The unit's commander clued me in. We're planning to withdraw, but for that we need the wounded stable. Next destination is Azovstal. Hundreds of civvies already hiding there. Ought to be some medics as well. I spent the whole day cleaning up the wounds and pulling out bullets. Warped, high caliber and broken, shattered 5.45 ones alike. Several times someone opened fire directly above. Sounds of thundering across the basement. It took all of my resolve not to be paralysed by horror and keep working. I asked one of the soldiers if they had combat vests to spare. They said that if there was a spare one around, it probably hadn't saved its previous wearer. Wow. By the time I returned, I had a good deal more grey hair than before. When Victor called me up, he promised to be brief. I think he understood everything just from my look. I certainly understood his long looks a lot better now. Victor looked into my eyes for a long time. In the end, we'll make the Russians pay for everything. But not now, was the unsaid part. I nodded and he nodded back. For now we work as before, but tonight I will start inquiring about evacuation. Help is up to 4. Dima's mood is down to 1. Kolya has a wife back home, so when he stopped showing up, I didn't blame him. I mean, the Russians were taking pot shots at us the whole time. Alex was among those who kept the mobile connection to the city alive. Most of his colleagues had left, and today, even he got himself shot in the arm. 4 weeks into the occupation, the solidarity of the earlier days was giving way to despair. Our patients spoke of looters, thieves and collaborators spotting targets for the Russian artillery. Our hospital functioned as before, in huge part thanks to Victor and his spirited leadership. God, we were losing so many patients daily, hourly. The city was dead and its citizens were scattering. I knew this would happen. That's why we had to keep the connection alive. Split people up, and it's dog eat dog. He winced in pain. When I reached for the painkillers, he waved my hand away. Save it for women and the kids. I know you're running out. In the messages you people were sending. Just then the door opened into the operating room. It was Anya. Hold on here, we've got a situation. I expected to be set upon the moment. I walked out. I had gotten used to it, even a little numb. So much misery can a human witness before it becomes routine. It was especially hard on Anya, though she did a good job of hiding it. But in the hallway I wasn't set upon. I just saw a lone woman with a tear-stained face sitting by a wall, dressed in ragged winter clothes and holding a shifting bundle of bloody clothes in her hand. Going over it as it wheezed in a feeble voice. Oh no. Victor is busy with his own cases. Told me to take this to you, and he whispered. It was a girl, barely 2 years old, with her face pale like a ghost, racked with pain. Kids that age normally cried like mad, while she only had quiet, pitiful noises. Something was making it hard for her to breathe. I approached and told the mother I would do a checkup. Looking up at me with glassy eyes, she whimpered, but didn't protest. She told me the child's name was Katya. throwback to the last one. The woman the children were staying with who got killed, but of course a different gadget. Something fell nearby. She kept repeating the last part. Just as I thought, there were fragment wounds, a lot of them. After a mere few weeks in this hell, I knew exactly what it was that fell nearby. And I could tell that this was a black case. The wounds were too heavy. No pulse. And our blood reserves had run out of all types. But I told the woman I'd be within a minute and stepped away to consult Ozania. I know there's little hope. I know Victor would say so. She took a deep breath. There has to be something we can do. There isn't little hope. There is none, I thought. And we'd had patients die before. I remember all of mine. And you know the rules. We're running out. I swallowed. Can't afford to waste medicine. To my surprise, she didn't object. Didn't even give me a wounding. I made a mistake by dating you, Lux. She just said quietly, "We're not going to try. Why are we even here?" I could try and treat the little girl, knowing that my efforts were doomed from the start. I could do what Victor would do, break the news to the mother, tell her this was a basket case and move on. All that was left to do was administer painkillers. At the very least, I could make this call and accept the responsibility. Maybe foolish, but I can't help but think of my 5-year-old niece. She turned 5 last month. Well, the hospital readiness is at 2. Huh. Try to operate. It's not going to work, but try. Victor sent it to us. We took the child to the operating room where Alex was. He made room before I could even ask him. "Thank you," and he whispered. And then it all went to hell. We pulled out all the fragments, but there was no undoing the damage, nothing to replace the lost blood with. When the girl's heart gave out, we couldn't restart it. I noted down the time and plopped on the chair. Annie sank her face into her bloodied palms. Alex sat in silence as well, looking at the floor. The only sound in the room was a flatline tone. Fuck those murderers. Fuck this war. Anya's gained the 1 on mood. For trying. Or hospital readiness down to 1. I had to step out for a smoke. Losing patience was bad enough, and losing child patience, there was no getting used to it. In the dusty rubble under my feet, I saw chunks of multicolored tile that used to decorate the hospital steps. Red, blue, yellow, bright islands among the debris. My mind went back to how the place used to look before the war. There used to be a bed of flowers in front of the entrance. First trace of bloom came March. Right on time every year. Come this year's March, not even a hint was left. Just a shell crater. I went back inside. There's a commotion in the lobby. Victor called a general meeting. Most of the staff had gathered near Victor's office, where he announced his trademark commanding base. Our military reports that the Russians have taken the eastern outskirts of Mariupol. Our men are withdrawing toward the industrial districts. He paused, giving space to our dread-filled silence. Our building is badly damaged. We are running out of medicine, fuel, and even drinking water. The time has come to admit our operations are no longer tenable. He sighed. I declared the evacuation of all personnel and patients who can be transported. First we moved to Berdyansk, Then we'll try to reach friendly territory. Objections? Going on. Victor simply stated out loud what was on everyone's mind. Get ready in 2 hours. In case of an emergency, we'll retreat to the volunteer centre near the drama theatre. The coordinates will be provided. Dismissed. Victor asked me and Anya to wait for a bit. I'll take the kids in my car, including that boy of yours, Danya. You two focus on keeping our patients stable in case the road gets bumpy. The evacuation was ready in a couple of hours. All available transport was put to work. Our ambulances, from ambulances to civilian cars. It's like Normandy, evacuating the troops in World War II. Except these are civilians, not troops. Used everything from ships to rowboats. Danny wasn't a fan of riding separately, but I assured him to the best of my ability. He trusted Victor to take care of him. Oh, I trusted Victor to take care of him. Hell, in so much uncertainty, I didn't trust myself, but I trusted Victor. Our ambulance was at the tail of the column. We packed several patients in, including Alex, the mobile company's technician. I operated on earlier. He was still in pain, but taking it as well as I remembered. We said our farewells to everyone and took off. The journey through the city was tense, checkpoint after checkpoint. The Russians and Kadyriovites manning them kept ogling Anya. Thankfully, nothing came of it in the end. On the last checkpoint out of the city, the Russians even wished us safe travels to Bedinesk. The good among the bad, huh? And once we passed, they opened fire. Oh, fuck. Take it back. There was a series of distant pops and then bullets ripped through the ambulance. Blood spattered across the windshield. Our driver was killed on the spot. Anya screamed. The ambulance stopped. Our dead driver slumped in his seat. The sedan next to us sped up, but got hit with a mortar shell. Explosions tossed it to the side of the road like a toy. Its right side was completely ruined. And on the surviving part, I could clearly see a sign. Children. My own shock passed quickly. There were bullets whistling past, deafening pops of explosions, terrified screams of our patients, and Anya, who was covering her ears. We had to escape fast. Escape by car if we can. We're not going to get anywhere on foot. I knew Annie was our only chance. She had to take over the driving. But for that I had to bring her back to her senses. Anya, look at me. I shook her by the shoulders. Thankfully it worked. Her eyes focused on me. She was terrified but not in shock anymore. Can't stay here, get us out. I pulled the driver off his seat and Anya squeezed herself into his place and floored the gas pedal. I couldn't see where the other cars in our column went, but Anya drove ours between the buildings, where we were harder to hit. We only stopped half an hour later. Anya held the steering wheel and with a death grip. I could understand why. We didn't know if the Russians were going to chase us. They didn't. We quickly checked on our patients. None were hit. We left the danger zone quickly enough. I turned my attention to Anya. She needed some time to stop shaking, but was otherwise unharmed. Our evacuation attempt had failed. All that was left to do was head to the rally point named by Victor, the volunteer centre near the drama theatre. Provided help up to 6. We came to the closest place that made sense, the volunteer centre near the regional drama theatre. A place to sit down, a plastic cup of tea, and a tiny greasy toast felt like royal treatment. Anya rested her feet a little while I asked around about Victor, and the volunteers directed us to the drama theatre. That's where the refugees were flocking, since it could house literally hundreds. Which makes it a target with the way things are going. And that's where Victor decided it'd be most useful. Only a few people were outside, sitting on the stairs, under the walls. Most of them were smoking. Someone trying to catch phone connections in vain. Then I saw an imposing figure in a warm rescue jacket walk out of the building, holding a cup of steaming hot drink. Ah, who do I see? Victor shouted merrily when he saw us. Then his face dropped. Without any questions, he understood the broad strokes of what had happened. They shot at you. Anya whimpered, but recalled herself quickly. I just nodded. Fuck. He took a large swig of his scalding drink. It always startled me when he did that. Don't worry. The military will make them pay, and we doctors have our own duty. It's good that you two came just in time to say goodbye to Dania. My heart sank. But Victor quickly reassured us Dania was alive and well. He'd been picked up by a group of volunteers who were going to evacuate the children. We came looking immediately, making our way through the rows of huddled refugees inside. Inside the drama theatre, people were everywhere. There were probably only a few hundred there, but it reminded me of how huge my city was. And soon enough, I saw about a dozen kids being gathered by some volunteers. Anya went to speak with them, while I went looking for Dania. His face lit up when he saw me. Dima! He rushed to give me a hug, which I gladly returned. Victor told me you and Anya were going on a trip, but I thought you'd be gone longer. I mean, it's good you came. He looked away. I thought I wouldn't see you again. I sighed. Almost came to that. Me and Anya could easily have joined the rest of the victims on that cursed highway. Then, nobody would see us again, indeed. Well, now I'm here. I smiled and messed up his hair. He giggled and swatted my hand away, saying he was too old for that. Sure you are, big guy. What do you think about those folk? Do you trust them? Okay, he nodded several times. They got a bus, wrote children on it, in big letters. He made a wide gesture to demonstrate. I winced. Children, in bold letters. Said that in front of the drama theatre. I'd also seen it on some of the cars in our ill-fated evacuation convoy. The one the Russians had shelled anyway. They said it will be going now before it's dark. I wish you could go too. He gave me a stop. He had nowhere to go, no relatives, nobody. Danny would have to stay with volunteers or become a refugee. Just then, I heard someone start calling out names. A young woman with some NGO's ID badge was calling the children and checking their names on the list. Didn't take long before Danilo Borko was called. His last name was high up on the alphabet. Me and Dania looked at each other. He won't go. Oh God. The now and future hero. His mood is greater than equal to... his mood is greater than 1. And therefore, he won't go. Ask Danny to stay with you. Danny had nowhere to go. And he wasn't my kid or Annie's kid, but damn if he wasn't family by now. I could never replace his father, but I couldn't abandon him just to become another refugee kid. I went to speak with the volunteers and told them about the bombed convoy, told them they needed a better plan. Hidden routes, bribes, anything but slapping children on a car and hoping it would be enough. They were unsettled, and more than a little upset. But they couldn't change their plan right away, right before departure. They said they'd have to risk. When they started loading kids up onto their bus, Danny wasn't with them. We're all gonna make it. He gave me a small nudge on the thigh. I looked down, and he stood to attention and nodded like a little soldier. His face must have torn him. Adorable. Brave little Dania. I had to be brave too, both for his and Anya's sakes. He saluted him right back. The volunteer bus vanished into the distance, slowly driving round the debris. Me, Anya, and the rest of our former staff got to work helping out where we could. We worked tirelessly. A few hours later, when Victor and I stepped out for a break, it was well earned. We walked off to the side. I brought my smokes. He brought his tea. And as usual, he gulped it down while steaming hot. How can you like that? You can't feel the taste when it's that hot. It's tea. You drink it to stay sharp. You want taste, drink apple juice or fucking Buratino. I don't know what Buratino is, but I couldn't help but laugh. Because he swore so brazenly, but also because Buratino was a Soviet brand of soda. Ah! An ancient reference, if I'd heard one. Victor laughed too, then we heard the planes coming. We each looked at each other wide-eyed. Back inside, downstairs. And a short whistle from up above. A deep thud, ringing pain in my ears, and a wave of hot air hitting us. Then a wave of hot grey ash. Near his family. I bolted back toward the theatre. God, it looked so bad, and even worse, Annie was still inside. There were screams everywhere. People popped in and out of clouds of dust, looking for their loved ones or simply escaping the carnage. I was among the few running inside. Anya! I called out without her stopping. The stairways were filled with people, dirty, dusty, desperate, with terror on their faces. I don't know how much time I spent inside looking for Anya. Eventually, I found myself on the stairs leading towards the main hall. There was a pit I had to jump over. There was a hole in the dome, shaped like a half moon. The stage below was covered in heavy debris. I couldn't breathe. My eyes were watering from the dust and smoke. There were bodies everywhere. The wriggling wounded, the unmoving dead. And no trace of Anya. Just then I heard a voice, "Hold it right there! Like this, be ready! You might squirm quite a bit." I ran after the voice and saw Anya. Her jacket was torn and covered in dust. She had a fresh bruise on the cheek, and her hair was a mess, but she was alive. She was trying to help a blood-covered man lying on the floor. I simply joined in. She merely glanced at me and we started working together. Now that we were both alive, we had a duty to our patients. I was in awe at her spirit. In the last few weeks I had seen people break without seeing half what she'd seen. She was made of iron, not a touch of empathy, and understanding that I often lacked. It made her a great doctor and a terrific human being. One I could see myself spending the rest of my life with. Once we had helped everyone we could, I would tell her as much. That evening we returned the volunteer centre nearby. Completely exhausted, I kept looking at Anya and replaying the day's events in my head, recalling how I ran around looking for her, and how much I wanted to make sure she was alive. Once we were alone in the room downstairs, I gave her a gentle hug. Pose. I started from afar. I needed to muster the courage first. Today it was tough. How are you holding up? Annie was tense at first, but soon relaxed. Holding up okay, that's the odd part. When did I get used to all this? She sighed. Ignore me, I'm just worried about what comes next. She hugged me closer, sinking into me for comfort. And it suddenly hit in all fullness how dear to my heart she was. Despite all suffering, hunger, cold, and a terrible, terrible strain, Annie stood by me this whole time. Every moment was brighter because she was there for me. We'll get out of this alive, you hear me? We will. I took a deep breath, let go of Anya, and stepped down onto one knee. I've never been so sure about anything in my entire life. I don't know what comes next, but I know one thing, I don't ever want to lose you. Not now, not ever. Anya, will you marry me? I froze. Me and Annie had been together a few years now, but I'd always sidestepped the question of us two getting serious. And now it was me who wanted it, truly wanted it. And I could tell I made the right call. Oh my god, Dima, yes, of course, yes. I felt so light and so immensely full. Back on my feet, I drew Anya into a hug. We had no rings, no gown, and no flowers for the bride. But one day we would, I knew it. Jane proposed to Anya. Kalabuda Volunteer Centre didn't stay unnoticed for too long. Fell under fire the very next day after the drama theatre hit, and we had to move again. Me, Anya, and the rest watched the smoking ruin, thinking, today, knowing this was it, we weren't going to help anybody else. As usual, Victor was the first to come around, always rocking the storm. Had to be with a life like his. He wasn't going to take an easy way out even now. People are flocking towards Azovstal. There's bunkers there, built to survive a nuke. Perhaps they'll need a doctor there. I didn't ask if anyone wanted to join him. The rest of you bail. You are the next generation of the future. You lot should leave and save yourselves. Part of me thought abandoning him would be a cowardice, another part grudgingly agreed. Next day we caught a message on the radio, barely audible through the interference. There was going to be a green corridor out of Mariupol, an evacuation. I shuddered, remembering our previous attempt. I didn't want to repeat, but this was our last chance. My city was gone either way, turned into a mass grave by the Russians. I gave it some thought and decided to... I can't do any of those because it all went well. Well, that's a stupid thing to say in this situation, but with these two it did. Evacuate with Anya and Danya. In the end, I had at least two major reasons to try and leave Mariupol, Anya and Danya. We were a family now, and we weren't going to split up. Leaving Mariupol felt strange. The shellings, the dead, the constant fear. I'd almost gotten used to this, my new city's disfigured face. I'd almost forgotten life outside even existed. I could tell Anya felt that way too. Only Danya seemed to be glad to leave the nightmare behind. He was a resilient kid, but also he didn't have the same bond with Mariupol we, the adults, had. At the checkpoint, they kept us waiting for hours. They checked our phones, cleared of anything compromising beforehand. Made us strip, checked for patriotic tattoos or the telltale bruises of weapon use. A man before us had a Ukrainian coat of arms tattooed on his shoulder. The Russians took him away. We never saw him again. After we passed the checkpoint, he and Anya tensed up, wondering if the Russians were going to shell us again. They didn't. We had passed about 3 dozen checkpoints before we reached the friendly territory, the city of Zaporizhia. Only then, we could really breathe out. The war continued. The future was hazy at best. But we were together. We were alive. During those terrible months in 2022, there were many heroes in Mariupol, and not all of them carried rifles. One of those heroes was Dima. True to his oath, he put others before himself every step of the way. He was brave, determined, and resourceful, and if he was tired, he never let anybody see it. They'd never learn his name, nor remember his face. There were dozens, if not 100, who owed him their lives. Dima didn't do all he could, he did more. Epilogue. Sorry. The Russo-Ukrainian War has been going on for 8 years, and in that time Mariupol has already been attacked before. This novel, however, focuses on the events of the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. And while it's generally considered to have begun around 5 AM February 24, 2022, after Vladimir Putin's declaration of the special military operation, Mariupol heard the first volleys more than an hour earlier. The siege of Mariupol lasted for 2 months, 3 weeks and 5 days. The Russians captured the city at the price of 95% of its buildings and the destruction of the Azovstal steel plant. Yes. During this time, the city saw massive indiscriminate shelling, air raids on civilian targets, and a humanitarian disaster with a likely death toll of tens of thousands. At the same time, there was a fierce resistance of the city's defenders, including the Ukrainian naval infantry and the Azov Regiment. Numerous acts of individual bravery from the civilians and the heroic work of local hospitals. At first, evacuation columns leaving the city were fired upon by the Russian artillery. The refugee center in the regional drama theatre was bombarded, killing 300 to 600 people. Afterward, the Russians set up filtration camps for all refugees to go through. Those who failed the filtration process disappeared without a trace. Of those who couldn't escape or chose to stay, from 20,000 to 50,000 citizens were forcibly deported to Russia. In June 2022, an outbreak of cholera was reported in the city. The Russian administration Mariupol denies any problems and has voiced no plans of rebuilding the city. As of July 2022, the end of the war is not in sight. As of September 2023, it isn't either. It has ended. As of September 2023, there is no sign of an end of the war either. Ukrainians are fighting back bravely. Slava Ukrainie. We reached the end of our Ukrainian War Stories. I'm going to move on to something lighter next time. Probably Aces and Adventures. But in the meantime, be good to each other. Look after each other.